AI is exploding right now. From a company or a corporate perspective, how do you make sure that you have visibility and accountability and some guardrails around what that AI can and cannot do?
Hey everyone, on this episode of the Identity Heroes videocast, we were joined by Amit Vaidya. And Amit shared with us some of the ways that his career has shaped and developed over the years to becoming leading identity at one of the largest banks in the country. And along the way, he shared some of the tidbits about how to do more with the team that you have today, the role that AI agents are going to be playing in IAM going forward, and really it's also for vendors, a little bit of advice on what not to do when you are selling to major corporations. Let's go have a listen to what Amit has to share now. Welcome to this episode of the Identity Heroes videocast. My co-host today is Jerry Gable, and Jerry and I today are joined by Amit Vaidya, and we're thrilled to have you, Amit. This is exciting. We've had a chance to talk before, and we're thrilled to have you on the show with us today.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Amit. Love to hear your story, and looking forward to sharing it with the audience.
Well, for
Thank
our
you, Jay.
guests, the way that we're going to do this is we have a little bit of a structure here. So, Amit, we've identified you as one of the heroes in the identity industry, and our audience probably wants to know a bit of your background story. So, just like as we think about any good superhero story or like that hero's arc, everyone wants to know the origin story. What happened? Was it a radioactive spider? What did it that took you on this path? And maybe it was a radioactive spider. I don't know, but I
I wish it
digress.
was that exciting, but
Well, I'm going to make it even easier, and it will be a pretty exciting because what I like to do that makes it easy for our guests to, I'm sorry, our audience to really kind of identify there's not one true path to identity is I actually got your CV and you shared that with me ahead of time. I appreciate it. And I've gone through and I've just taken out some of the job titles that you've had since you graduated. And I'm going to read those in reverse order, if that's okay. And we'll kind of figure out, was this a linear path? Was the writing on the wall that you were headed to where you are today? Or maybe you had some detours along the way? That's cool.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Jerry, you ready for this? I got the list going. You ready?
Ready? I got my pen and paper. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. All right. So Amit, as I was looking through your CV, I started pulling out again, just the titles, and I've got, you were an analyst for quite some time. Then you became a senior analyst. And this was after, I believe, graduate school, that you undergrad. Okay. So this is between undergrad and graduate school. Got
Correct.
it. And then you sort of did this pivot into project management, and the project management title actually took you into many program management positions. And it feels like you've really found a niche there. That was like a fit through many years. And then all the way up to one of the largest banks in the country, where you were the SVP of Enterprise Identity and Data Protection. And so a long journey, but in the same path. Maybe this one was a little linear. What do you think, Amit?
I would say, project program management takes you in many different directions, right? It could be anything from people, process, technology. Um, my, I will say, my expertise and my skill sets lie in how do I bring all three together? And that translated from IT into security space. And that's when it kind of took off in the last 10 years. And then working within the security space, it then picked up within the identity access management space. And that's when I was tapped to consolidate and bring together the enterprise identity together that focus on workforce, customer, and physical. So that's how I ended up there.
Got it. Well, you mentioned, that transition of the undergrad and graduate school. There's really, we tell our audience that there's no defined degree for IAM per se. However, you went one direction and then you realized you wanted to go back to graduate school. What took you from the analyst, but going back to business school?
Well, and thinking through where I was in my career, right? I always wanted to learn more, wanted to get more into the business side of things, right? Because my undergraduate degree was in business administration and minor in IT. So I was able to kind of translate, business into what the technical terms were, right? Or technical requirements were, and vice versa. But I wanted to get more into understanding how budgets are formed, right? How the financials work, how the long-term strategies need to be, right? So the framework that the graduate school gives you helps elevate your understanding and how you start thinking about things. And that's, where that was something that I was craving as part of my growth. And so I decided to go join graduate school. And I did it while I was working because it was sponsored by the company I was working for. So that worked out
That is
well.
the best. If there's a lesson to be learned here, that is the
Yes.
best graduate school to have, is one that was employer
It's paid for.
sponsored. And so that really got you into that structured path, and then this went very much into this program management that followed thereafter, which is really what I'm going to project here. Was it more of like a holistic look at like programs as like a business?
Yeah, essentially what you're looking at is running your own business where you're making an investment, you're getting an ROI, right? And how are you reinvesting that, right? Or are you able to apply it in other different places? So that was the piece that really attracted me, and it helped me in my future career since graduate school.
That's awesome, Amit. I think it's so important to think about as we're working on projects, to implement technology or to, address business needs or security and compliance, that we've seen over and over again over the years that good project and program management is so important to the overall success of the project, right? It's not just I need to install this software and I'll see you later, but connecting with stakeholders. And it sounds like that's really an incredible value that you bring. And I think that's something that the audience should also take in, is that it's not all about the technology, but there's this whole other aspect of a successful program that needs to be cared for. So I think that's super that you bring that to the table.
Yeah, and in every project or program that I've led, one of the most critical things have always been the focus on people process as it relates to technology, right? If you bring in technology that the people don't like or the processes can't adjust, then it defeats the purpose, right? So all those three components have to go hand in hand.
I think you're actually just probably struck a chord with a lot of our audience, because as we think about identity programs, a lot of times it's like, oh, great. What is our team bringing to the rest of the organization again that they have to do or they have to adjust to? But maybe with the program side, do you have a way of communicating that a little differently or framing it?
Even within the identity access management space, the approach that I took was what is the business looking to solve, right? And how can I enable it in a secure way, right? So it was not, hey, this is what I bring to the table, this is what you have to do. It's, what are you looking to do, and how can we allow you to do what you want to do within our framework so it's done in a secure way, right? Without compromising our security posture. So that was the approach we took, and that helped me kind of drive a lot of the innovation and change within my last role.
Yeah, and Mark, I think another aspect of this is your understanding of the budget and the financials, and putting together that story that tells a pertinent and confident return on investment story, because you're in internal competition with other projects for that funding, right? So you've really got to have your pitch down for the execs and the stakeholders that are going to review and hopefully sign off on that project.
Yes. And, apart from the ROI and, the budget knowledge, you also have to understand risks, right? Being in the security space, like identity is a new perimeter. You don't get that right, everything else better be working as a secondary control, right? So when I'm going up and pitching, hey, here's what we need to do, here's what we need to accomplish this year, right? I've laid out a roadmap of where we need to be and what can we realistically get done each year so that we can make that incremental progress, right? And when I'm structuring that, I'm looking at what is the largest risk that I need to solve for first, and then kind of build out from there, right? So that prioritization based on risk also goes a long way in how you structure and focus on what you need to accomplish each year.
I'm hearing a little bit of the B school communication track that also comes into this, of being able to frame these things in a way that resonates, you have different alignment and different values across different parts of the organization, and you got to let them do what they want to do, but make it seem like it was their idea as you're bringing the thing to them to a degree.
Yeah. And when you start having a risk-based conversation, right, as an organization, because now you're not just referring to one department within an organization, you're looking at the holistic organization, right? So the risk applies to the entire organization, not just one little group. That's where it becomes a collective conversation, right? And that's where it gets that proper weight in terms of discussion and how it competes with other priorities. So that was the approach I took, and that worked. That worked well in making sure I had the right funding for the right projects to move the needle forward in the identity journey.
I dig it, so before we get into your gauntlets, your challenges, the hurdles that you overcame, if you were to think about like that perfect identity degree, so an IAM degree, if we were to just kind of put some core categories that would go into that curriculum, how might you frame what that would look like, whether it was graduate school or not, just if it was just one lump degree, what were important things to consider?
I think, from an identity perspective, you have to think about, how does identity access management work in a controlled space like a workforce identity, workforce IAM, right? And then you also have to teach folks, how does it work when it's not controlled within the SIAM space? And, moving forward, how is this going to impact when AI comes into the mix? Right? You have now AI agents that people are going to start leveraging to do things that they need to do. So, how do all these three different categories work, and how do you put the best practices and what technology can be leveraged to secure your identity and access management functions and the life cycle that it needs to run through? So, those are some key things I think that should be included as part of core.
Indeed. Yeah. And Mark, I don't think we would have heard identity for agents a year ago, right? Or even 6 months
No,
ago. That's the
that's
latest
it.
topic added to the curriculum.
Even 6 months ago, for sure. Well, as we're, Jerry, as we're thinking through this and Amit, following your journey into some of the challenges, I know that you do a lot of advisory services now, and you're helping some startups and figure out their paths and whatnot. As we think about failure, failure is kind of a loaded word, but sometimes failure can be a good thing because we learn from those moments. Any examples of projects that maybe didn't go as planned, but actually became a great learning experience or a pivot in your career?
Yeah. You know, as we were thinking of pivoting our identity journey, right? Um, Looking at the modern authentication mechanisms, right? As we're thinking about the FIDO standards, how do we put in identity proofing as part of it? Um, a couple of the products we brought in, thinking that that's what was best of the breed at the time. But by the time we got to implementation, it was not the top product, and it didn't yield the results we were looking for. But what it taught us was, what should you be looking for, right? It enhanced our understanding of what are we missing, what are we not getting that we needed to leverage to fight fraud, right? So understanding that from a product that we implemented but couldn't quite get the desired results, right? That failure of delivery is where we were able to learn from it and say, okay, I know exactly what I need now. And the next set of products we looked for, we made sure that those other check marks were hit, and how those companies were looking at the future, right? As trends change, as advancements happen, are those products keeping up with that? That was a key component that we missed in our first iteration or the first product that we implemented, right? Because that company was happy where they weren't innovating and keeping up with what the new trends were happening in the market, right? Especially as you think about in COVID time, digital transformation excelled, right? AI, as it started exploding on the scenes, you had a lot of deep fakes that were coming out. So when you were talking about identity proofing, are your tools able to detect some of the deep fakes and let you know that, hey, this is a fake, this is not a real person? So that was one of the key learnings that we got as part of our, the product that we implemented that didn't live up to its expectations. But we were able to come back very quickly, find a different partner, implement it, and get it rolling.
Yeah, and identity proofing is one of those sort of more difficult aspects of identity, I think, a really challenging one, especially when you think about the ability to validate data across different jurisdictions. It's very different as well. So yeah, I can see how that would have been a very challenging project.
Yeah.
And reducing the
Especially,
friction. You both have the benefit of, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, finish your thought.
I'm just thinking that you both actually have a unique background and that you both have shared banking experience and banking background. Jerry, you a little bit as well. And, to a degree, modern banking isn't one of just walking into a branch and finding the one that's closest to you and having a relationship with the teller. It's a very fickle business to a degree. It's like I can switch accounts so easily and so quickly from my phone if I wanted to. And so you need to reduce that friction as well throughout all this. And so all those security and risk things that we're trying to balance have to be also commensurate with a smooth transaction. So you're not scaring away bank clients, as you're doing so.
Right. And, if you
That's
don't
right.
have
I
the
think
right
it's fair to say
tools,
that banking has changed quite a lot since I've worked for a bank, Mark.
and it's an ever evolving space, right? So there will be more changes that'll come down the pike.
Well, Jerry, I think you're right. Like, obviously, banking's changed a lot in your time, and I don't want to. I wasn't trying to project there on career length or anything along those lines. But nevertheless, it is something where the measurement of like success and especially in financial industry is probably a lot different in other industries. So as Amit, as you're thinking about what were the measures of success, maybe most recently at PNC, but like just thinking through like the measures of success of a project for you. What were the KPIs? What were the goals? What were the things that you looked to as a measure of success and as reported?
So when we were looking at our measures of success from a customer standpoint, right, or even from workforce standpoint, can I get a modern authentication flow in with minimal friction, but still in a secure way, right? So how many, what was the adoption percentage was one. The second aspect was, did we have any downtime, right, where a customer or an employee was unable to get in? So those were a couple of the key ones that we were looking at, right? How the availability was, for the environment. And the third one was, through the new process flows that we put in place, what was the experience like? How did the customers perceive it, right? So there's that ENPS score that the bank tracks. And that was something that we also looked at from a customer satisfaction perspective as well.
Got it. And Jerry, as we're thinking it through the projects, in our own career, in our own place right now, I think a lot of us are just trying to figure out what is that measure of success for our IAM, and it changes and it varies. And I think back to the communication aspect of the degree that we discussed, it's really understanding what matters to that particular department's audience as you're selling the value of a project internally. Jerry.
Yeah, that's right. And the metrics are important. So Amit um, mentioned a couple ones that are fairly concrete. You know, how much adoption did you have of the advanced authentication? But the other one is a little bit softer, right? It's, well, what's the experience like? How do you put a score to that? So some things are, the metrics are pretty hard and fast and clear, which is great. But oftentimes we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the nebulous number I can put to this, or the real number I can put to this nebulous kind of context or concept, and sell that, and also prove that the project is being successful.
Couple of additional pieces that we also tracked were, what was our hit rate in terms of when we're doing ID proofing? Are we catching fraud, right? Which was the other part of it. And how much of it were we catching? Was there anything that kind of got through? right? So those are a couple other metrics that we were tracking in partnership with the fraud team.
Well,
All right.
go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, sorry to jump in, Mark, but
Yeah.
you sparked an idea there, Amit, and that is, I was at a fintech conference last year, and I'm wondering if that's like a crossover point where identity people should be talking to like fintech people because they're concerned about fraud and really focused on identity proofing and those sorts of things, account takeover and so on. And it was really one thing that stood out to me was it was really interesting, just the vocabulary that they use. I don't know if that's been your experience as well.
It absolutely is, because at the end of the day, you're trying to secure your customers' assets, right? And their transactions. So identity, again, is the new perimeter that you have to get it right, right? So whether you're in fintech or banking, at the underlying level, you're still trying to secure a customer. So yes, it absolutely applies, because the impact of fraud in either one is very real, right?
Yes.
And it can also take a reputational hit, which is even larger than the financial loss. So
Well, and our personal finances are probably one of our just most sacred things that like it's one of the most emotional things probably too. So that a misstep there by a financial institution, obviously is great risk, both in as you mentioned reputational, but also just for losing clients that would bounce to another group. Any thoughts, Amit? And as you were thinking through at PNC about the security features, as we think about banking, you probably had very wide generation of clients, of banking customers. So you had like the digital natives who, TikTok, everything's very fluent and they get it and it's very easy. So ID proofing and verification make a lot of sense. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, my parents who wouldn't feel really comfortable with some of these tools. How do you find the balance between that and the risk?
well, so we really had to make sure that we had products that supported customers from all different walks of life, right? But our goal was to educate the ones that were on the less secure spectrum, so that we can start moving them to more modern way of authenticating, right? Again, within their comfort zone, but at some point I have to start eliminating my weakest points, right? And still continue to support the customer, whether transitioning them to voice authentication or some other form, right, where they're still comfortable. Um, and if they just feel comfortable staying with user ID password, hey, I'm going to send you a text message that's going to have a MFA code, right? That we're going to use every single time. That's a bare minimum that has to happen if you're not comfortable with the fingerprints and the ID proofing components, right? So we were working to continuously educate and elevate their experience, right, while making sure we're continuing to maintain our security posture.
Well, I love the failure story. I love the spinning into the positive light, how this all came together. Now, I'm guessing a lot of those services are third-party vendor services that you brought in. I'm sure part of our audience is also on the vendor side. Any tragic mistakes or words of wisdom that you can give vendors as they're selling products into organizations like PNC?
Um, Many. Uh, I mean, I've had vendors who come in, promising the moon, but when you look at their product, it delivers maybe not even getting up to the edge of the space, right? To, vendors who come in for one purpose, but they're kind of throwing everything they have out there instead of that purpose that they came in to have the conversation with. So, know what you're selling, right? Come in to talk about what you want to talk about and not just throw everything, including the kitchen sink, in the conversation. And have a focused conversation on what the pain points are and, how do you help solve that, right? Partner with the customer on what it is that they're looking to solve, not just try to sell them everything you have. I would say would be a key message to the vendor community.
Sounds like good advice, Mark. Those points. And also, that sounds like would lead to a much more productive conversation, Amit, as well.
Yes, absolutely. Because, time is precious on both ends, right? It's not one is more precious versus the other. So making the best use of that time to have a productive conversation goes a long way.
So a lot of respect for being able for a person who might actually say the boundaries of what the product doesn't do and clearly say, I'm glad we have this time together, but that's not something we can do to not waste time either way.
Yeah.
Makes good sense. Makes good sense. Well, thinking back to on the program management side and putting the kind of a little bit of the B school hat on, as you're thinking to collaboration with other departments as you're doing this, any words of wisdom of like how questioning or how you engage with various teams to find out what does matter to them to tell that right story?
Well, you know, the one thing that worked for me, uh, I would say initially, I came in, I'm like, hey, I'm charged to turn this thing around, to modernize identity and access management. Here's my path I'm going to lay out. But as I started showcasing that roadmap on what we're looking to do and what our end stage needs to be, I had a lot of people raising their hands, going, "This may not work for our business model." Right? That's when I realized, this is going to be my next step, which is engaging with the stakeholders to say, okay, here's my initial thought on where we need to be. What works, what doesn't work for you, right? Having that conversation really helped kind of elevate our roadmap and our final destination, our North Star, where we want it to be, because it gave us a good understanding of what are the different stakeholders, right? Because your stakeholders who serve retail clients, right? Consumers, individual consumers versus a corporate client are different, right? What they're looking for is different versus what, a wealth management client is like a wealth management business is looking for is completely different. So how do we take into account all their requirements, come up with a standardized way, but a range of different things that they can do so we can support everybody's requirements, right? And that helped reshape our overall roadmap and what capabilities we needed to bring to the table for a successful rollout.
Well, Mark, that certainly resonates with some of my experiences as well. You think of a financial institution as sort of a monolithic thing, but no, there's extremely diverse business units in there. So yeah, I admit I can see the challenge of trying to meet all those varied requirements in a cohesive way. Yeah, that's quite a challenge.
And right? Customer experience matters, right, in this space. So as I mentioned, we look at the ENPS scores, right? This is where we're looking at, what a retail customer's score might be different from what a corporate customer's score would be, because
Absolutely.
what we heard from our stakeholders was they don't want the same experience that a retail person has on the corporate level. They wanted slightly elevated, right? So, finding what that elevation looks like and still meeting our security requirements, uh, that was the key.
Almost feels like a place where you could use identity as a strategic differentiator and like for the wealth management side, making it feel like that secured experience of the movies where there's triple locks and oh, wait, there's another lock behind the lock and just making people feel, I mean, almost part of the marketing a little bit too, but
Well,
for a
that,
good reason,
and
for secure.
you can monetize some of that, right? If you think about it, right? If I give you an exclusive card that has it's kind of like the YubiKey, but it's in a card format. You have to tap it every time you need it, along with your fingerprint. Right now, you have multi-factor enabled right there. So, how do you Can you monetize something like that? Right, because it's an exclusive. It's a very exclusive offering that you don't get in most other banks, right? And I'm not saying necessarily a YubiKey, but something similar where there's a second factor that's available that you can tap that's only you assigned to you, and that's handed out by the bank and not necessarily procured anywhere else, right? So it offers that secure element that is very specific to that bank.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I've never owned one, but like the black cards and like global services with United. I mean, there's all these reasons that elevated thing can have that high touch experience that, it is expected. And it's interesting to think about how you'd monetize that, So one thing that I know that doesn't change, and I'm assuming probably hadn't in your career, is that you didn't have unlimited budget to do all these things. There was always a constraint of having to prioritize and pick to do what. Any thoughts about how you did more with the team you had or the resources that you had to punch above the weight, so to speak?
Yeah, and when we looked at, our overall identity access management program, right, we're not only looking at how to modernize, but how do we make our own processes more efficient, right? How can I remove the task that took the longest, right? Can I automate it, right? And can I reuse that individual to do something different, something more meaningful, right? So that was always one of the things that we looked at, whether it's, automating non-directory aware applications, right? And managing their access certification life cycles. If I can automate that and reduce that by 30%, now I need 30% less resources on that function. I can use them to do something else, right? I can use them to learn a new product that we're trying to bring up. So those were the different areas that we looked at from an operational perspective, and we were able to apply some of that and make most of the resources we had.
No, that and even Jerry, as you mentioned at the start of this, the conversation around agentic support and agentic, automation, I should have said, wasn't even a conversation 4 months ago. And like, who knows what we're going to be doing 4 months from now that automates things even further, to do so.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's one of the promises of AI is that it can make us more efficient, or much more so, and so we can do more with less, or do more with the same people that we have today. So that's part of the promise.
Yeah. And
Amit, thinking about that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. We just mentioned agentic AI. What's an area that you are looking and learning up on, reading up on yourself to further your own knowledge base?
well, this is actually one of the biggest areas, right, to study right now, which is AI is exploding right now, right? Outside of the chat GPT, how are people leveraging AI to make their day-to-day more easier, right? More efficient. And how do you enable that AI agents to allow people to do more? But from a company or a corporate perspective or enterprise perspective, how do you make sure that you have visibility and accountability and some guardrails around what that AI can and cannot do, right? So that's the part that I'm kind of interested in reading up on. And, there's so much research and so much development happening in that space, right? And a lot of new companies are coming up with different ways of putting those guardrails. So that's the next big thing that I'm kind of studying up on right now.
Yeah, man, that was the topic of a lot of side conversations at the recent Identiverse conference as well. There's definitely a lot of people thinking about this, sharing ideas out in the open, whether it's at a conference like that or on LinkedIn these days. A lot of good dialogue going on out there on this topic. So yeah, it's super interesting to follow right now.
That's a great point, Jerry. Like LinkedIn and whatnot. Amit, is there anything on your side where you're finding good resources that, our audience might also think to look for research?
I would say, outside of LinkedIn, there are many podcasters who are talking about it, right? CISO series is one of the ones that I usually listen to. They have some good content every now and then. But just keeping track of the news, right? Because a lot of companies are coming out and announcing things, whether on LinkedIn or outside of LinkedIn, right? There are a lot of technology magazines, or different online portals that will also report on the advancements in this space. So just keeping track of that through, my Google feed, and Google is good about feeding you that kind of information as it comes.
The robots are telling us which robots.
Yes.
It becomes very all the way this comes together. But that's awesome. Well, I have a hunch when we reconvene, probably in a year's time, like we won't even imagine. Like, I can't even imagine what the world's going to be like at that point versus what we're talking about here on the show today. But this is awesome. I mean, you've done so many different things. You've gotten so high. You've done so well in your career. Any final words of wisdom for the audience as they're thinking about, like, did I do the right thing or study the right thing in school, or am I doing the right job right now in IAM? Any closing thoughts?
I would say, don't stress, right? But keep yourself open to learning and talk to one another, right? There are so many other IAM professionals in the industry, and people are more than happy to talk about, what are some of the best practices that you should be looking at, even if you're not doing it, right? One of the things that someone posted earlier on LinkedIn was like, I was just reading at it earlier today was, if you think like, if you look around, you think there are so many mature IAM programs. They're not. Everyone feels like, hey, there's so much more I could be doing, right? But the important aspect is people are now starting to have conversations with each other to say, hey, what are you doing? Can I do something differently than what I am today? Right? Doing more with less, right? How do I pivot and do more with the less number of resources that I have? And that is driving a lot of collaboration and idea sharing that people are able to leverage to move the needle.
Love that. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask, right? Go on LinkedIn, ask, someone might seem like they're too far up, but I think a lot of very senior people like yourself, you enjoy hearing that and maybe even providing mentorship, not trying to put you on the spot there, but don't be afraid to ask, like find those paths.
And the one thing I will say, I've joined many groups where people freely discuss these kind of ideas, right? And the whole purpose of that group is to share ideas and knowledge so that people can learn from each other.
Well, I think that's great. And Amit, you've shared so much that I think our own audience is going to learn from today. And speaking of these other people in these other groups, I mean, who is out there that you would recommend that Mark and I should interview and have on the show for a future recording?
Absolutely. One of the people I had interviewed and I wasn't able to bring him on board to my team in the past, and he's doing really good work, is Rohit Agnihotri. You can find him on LinkedIn. I'll send you his name and his LinkedIn profile. But he also hosts a podcast. He talks a lot about IAM, and it's really good to see a lot of the content and the dialogue that generates.
That's awesome. That's a great recommendation. Thanks for
Love it.
that.
Well, we've talked about breaking down the silos of identity. I think we're breaking down the silos of competitiveness too. There's just so much of a great community around IAM right now that we're all supporting each other to do these things together. So love the recommendation, and we'll certainly reach out to him. Well, Amit, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great.
Hey, Mark and Jerry, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you as well. It's great. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Jerry, thanks as always. And to our audience, thanks for spending your time with us. Be sure to check out the channel for other episodes, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.